I solemnly swear that I am up to no good.
Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot and Prongs are proud to present the Marauder's map.
If you succeed tonight, more than one innocent life may be spared.
Expecto Patronum!
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We're going over Chapter 14, Snape's Grudge. Jenn is back.
Hello everyone.
And it's just a super interesting title. I don't know that we really get into a specific grudge that he has. It seems just a general dislike.
I think it's just to set the mood that he's not going to be happy this
He's
chapter.
disgruntled.
Yes.
I just wanted to point out before we get into this chapter, and there's a lot in this chapter to get into, but we start off with the brilliant image of Flitwick teaching the doors to recognize a picture.
I love it.
Can we just sit on that for a second? Flitwick is teaching doors to recognize. The brilliance across the board is just phenomenal. Don't sleep on Flitwick. He's awesome.
It's one of those things where you read it and you're just like, no, that makes sense.
I read it and I was like, that is the best thing I think I've ever read.
Yep.
That's great. And yeah, it's just another day at Hogwarts.
Yeah, just another day.
Anyway, so in the last chapter we mentioned that Sir Cadogan was not long for his job, and he wasn't. He was fired immediately, and they brought in the fat lady is back. But with conditions. She was immaculately restored, which I'm assuming was done by Filch?
Oh. An interesting question.
Yeah, I'm assuming it was done by Filch, and I'm like, I don't know. We've talked about it before. Like, do they just like roll up, like fix the gashes, or like how do they do it? I don't know.
Is Filch like painting her together?
Maybe, I don't know. I'd assume they use special paint to make them move, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But she's also guarded by security trolls.
Yes.
Which is just an interesting concept. They're not the brightest.
No.
They're not the fastest.
No.
They are mean. I'll give them that.
I was gonna say it's mainly for intimidation.
Probably.
And she sneaks in a little thing that's not very child friendly when she says that the guard trolls are comparing the size of their clubs.
They like to beat people over the head with clubs.
They do.
That is their favorite pastime.
Also going into the intimidation fact. Also, unpopular opinion, I feel bad for Cadogan being fired. Technically, he did his job. His job wasn't well defined, but he did technically do his job. In a literal sense.
In the very most literal, exact sense, yes.
Yes.
He also let a murderer into the common room.
Minor details.
Minor details. He wants to fight everybody. He didn't want to fight him. I don't know. Anyway, so Ron, we learn, is more popular than Harry for the first time ever because everybody wants to hear of his heroic encounter with Sirius Black, which he gives them in great detail. I'm surprised he didn't like write a little memoir right now and try to sell it, maybe for fundraising for the Quidditch team, like Fred and George.
There you go. It all comes back together.
Yep. So he's relishing this moment in the spotlight, whereas Neville is forced to the darkest corners of the world. He's forced to wait outside the portrait for someone to even let him in.
All my notes for this chapter just say poor Neville.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I get it. But also, like, if you're McGonagall...
Yeah.
Like, come on.
She really goes harsh on him.
McGonagall is just harsh this entire... I have my issues with McGonagall. If you've listened to our episodes before, all of my issues with McGonagall stem from this book. But anyway.
But, like, what if he has to go out at night? Like, is he not going to be able to get back into sleep? I mean, this just seems kind of cruel.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a fair punishment. It feels cruel.
You'd have to... Like, McGonagall should be like, if I'm going to make him not know the passwords, you have to have someone else. You have to put someone else there.
Right.
That's like another form of, like, cruelty to children.
It's a little... It's borderline child abuse.
A little bit. Yeah. It's like, you can't force him to just sit out there all day. Like, what if he was the last person in?
No, right. That's my point. Like, what if he has to
You're
go
just going to make
something?
him sit out? I mean, he has... When he's forgotten the passwords, he's slept out there. But that's not fair.
But that's his own
Yeah.
fault, not because
Someone
someone's-
forcing it upon
right.
him. Yeah, right. Yeah, poor Neville.
So we don't really get Harry's perspective on this. Do we think Harry's at all excited that Ron is the popular one that everything is happening to?
I would imagine
or-
he's a little relieved
Okay.
that the attention's off of him for a little bit. He's never been one to seek attention.
No.
It's just always been upon him. So yeah, he's probably enjoying a little vacation from it, as brief as it probably is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think he's happy for Ron to be like,
Yeah.
Ron can enjoy this for a little while. That's fine. Let him do his thing. The other thing I wanted to point out in this chapter is Hagrid is awesome.
He is.
Ron and Harry end up going to visit Hagrid because Hagrid wrote them a note, like saying, "Hey, come down for tea." By the way,
Yeah.
come down for tea at 6 o'clock.
That's so late to have tea.
Oh, come down for the afternoon. 6 is not the afternoon anymore. That's early evening,
I hope it's not caffeinated tea.
right? It's like, and I'm assuming we're still in early spring, late winter, so it's probably like getting dark already.
That's a good point.
And I mean, Hagrid obviously said he'll come and get them and escort them to and
Right.
from, which has to be done. But anyway, aside from just the technicality of 6 o'clock tea, which they end up staying there for like 3 hours, right? So it's
Yeah,
like
it was
9
late.
o'clock.
Mhm.
That's crazy. Anyway, the conversation's really good, is my point. And essentially in the conversation, Hagrid says that Hermione is lonely and really quite stressed about all of her classes.
Yes.
And you guys really should try to reach out. She's coming down here all the time. Love talking with her, but you guys need to step up a little bit. And Ron starts in on Scabbers.
Yep.
And Hagrid's like, so you're mad at a cat for chasing a rat. You do realize that's kind of what they do. Like, it's a cat. What do you want it to do?
Right.
And then he brings out this killer mic drop line
I love it.
of like, well, you guys got to figure out, what do you care about more, brooms and rats or a friendship?
Yep.
Like, what's more important to you? Which kind of stops Ron and Harry kind of in their tracks a little bit, and he goes,
Some solid life advice right
it
there.
really is. And, you know, Hagrid's dropping some reality bombs on them and just being like, guys, you're dropping the ball here.
I also love the acknowledgement in that conversation where when Ron is complaining about Hermione being stupid about her cat, and Hagrid goes, people can be stupid about their pets, and then Buckbeak throws up a bunch of bones on his pillow.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, like it adds something to it that Hagrid is the one telling them
Sure. There's a lot of
get
layers
over
to that.
it. Yeah, because he's, you know,
Hermione's
such a
stupid
big...
about Crookshanks, Ron is stupid about Scabbers,
Yeah.
and Hagrid is stupid about Buckbeak and Norbert.
Right.
And like
Right. This is-
and Aragog and like yeah.
It's not even coming from someone who is really being a hypocrite about the topic. It's more looking at it from the perspective of he actually might know what he's talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great conversation that immediately gets ignored when Ron goes back and continues his aggression towards Hermione when she objects to Harry trying to sneak out and go to Hogsmeade again because they see a Hogsmeade poster. And Ron's like, oh yeah, let's go. And Hermione's like, are you kidding me? Like, you almost just got murdered.
Yep.
Why are you trying to get Harry to go? Which is a valid criticism. And a lot of what Hermione is, like the broom issue with McGonagall, and a lot of this has just been like, no, this is pretty some common sense logic that Hermione's not exactly wrong about.
No. This is kind of where, for me, because in the last chapter, when, you know, I think that chapter is the one right after Crookshanks has eaten Scabbers?
Yes.
Okay, so like right after, in the aftermath of that, I think it's very easy to be sympathetic to both sides. I could see Ron's, I could see Hermione's. This is the chapter where I go, okay, I'm on Hermione's side now. Like, Ron is just being incredibly aggressive to Hermione, and it doesn't need to be. Like, you can be mad at someone and just not be a jerk to them.
True. I think the only thing from Ron's point of view that can be reasonable is he says, look, I'd be fine with Hermione if you just acted sorry. Not even said
Right.
sorry, but
Right.
just acted sorry.
I don't think Ron has to forgive Hermione. I think Ron should still be not nice to her, but just not be openly a jerk to her. Like, he's very aggressive with her when he's upset with her. I think that's a bit much.
They're 13-year-olds that can't see the value of picking your battles
Yeah.
and putting aside some petty arguments for the larger picture, which was what Hagrid was trying to, like, okay,
Right.
you guys disagree on this. That's great. Is that worth a friendship?
Right.
No, it's not.
No.
Put it aside, put it down, reach out.
Yeah.
And after that great speech by Hagrid, Ron just completely ignores it.
Yes.
Yeah, so...
I also feel a little bit bad for Harry in this, because this is the second time in 3 books that Ron and Hermione have been fighting.
Well, Ron in the first book is horrible to Hermione.
Yes.
Just really bad.
Yeah.
So he's caught in the middle a lot,
Yes.
which is unfortunate.
I like that he eventually handles things
He
better.
tries to reach out to Hermione.
Yeah.
And makes some strides.
Yeah.
Sometimes are better than others. Sometimes he says
Yeah.
the wrong thing and it backfires. But other times, he's trying. I give him credit for that.
Yeah.
Again, wisdom of a 13-year-old, not exactly on point. So choosing his words is a little haphazard.
Right.
But
His heart's in the right place.
Yeah, he's trying. At least he's making an effort. So, long story short, he gets into Hogsmeade. He ends up sneaking out. However, Julie will be very pleased, because Julie and I have a long-standing agreement that things that could save your life should never be left behind, like your wand. You shouldn't casually discard your wand, like when you're facing Tom Riddle in the Chamber of Secrets. You shouldn't leave your invisibility cloak behind before you walk into the Forbidden Forest.
Yes.
Things you generally shouldn't do. Harry decides, yeah, I'll go into Hogsmeade, but I'm going to take the cloak with me. Thank you. Finally.
Yes.
Some wisdom.
Yes.
So Julie
He's
will be happy.
thinking.
Finally.
Good for him.
Yes.
And then he immediately makes a
And then he
really
makes a
dumb
very poor
decision.
choice. Yes, he makes poor choices. So, while using said cloak, Malfoy runs into him and Ron outside of the Shrieking Shack, and Malfoy, being Malfoy, starts picking at Ron.
Yeah. Which Ron really needs. I am sympathetic towards Ron. I don't want someone insulting my family, but he really needs to get a thicker skin about this. He knows Malfoy's just doing it to bother him.
Speaking as a male who, at one time, way back when, was 13, yeah, you're not really thinking.
That's fair.
Your anger flies off the handle a little bit easier when you're 13.
Okay.
And you can get into some scrapes. It happens. That's more of a he's a 13-year-old boy mistake. 30 or thick, I think is what we went with. 30 or thick.
Okay.
30 or thick.
I like it.
But yes, Ron eventually does need to get over that a little bit. Not get over it, but,
just
deal with it better.
Recognize when it's serious or when it's just intended to upset you.
Right.
Don't give him what he wants.
He's really good about doing that when it's Harry.
Yes. Right.
Harry, he's just trying to pick at you, like
Exactly.
you got, and then when it's him, it's a
just
complete
left.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Not that anybody can relate to that. When it's someone else, fine. When it's
Yeah.
me, however, no. So anyway, Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle start picking on Ron, so Harry decides, hey, I'm under the invisibility cloak, why don't I just mess with them a little bit? Which, here's the inherent risks. Obviously, we know what happens of the cloak slipping and Harry's head popping out.
yeah.
To throw mud, is he picking up the mud with the cloak and, like, throwing it? Or does he, like, get his hand outside of the cloak and throw?
That's a really good question.
Because I'm reading this, I'm like, how are you throwing in the cloak?
Right.
Like, you've
How
got to
do they
take
not-
the arm out to really get a good throw.
Huh.
And then you're getting mud on the cloak. And I'm like, how do you clean this cloak?
But
Is there a dry cleaning for the cloak?
But it
Or,
says
like-
later on in the chapter that he's got mud on his hands. So I don't think he's picking it up with the cloak.
Right. So he's literally picking up with his hands.
Yeah.
He has to take it out of the cloak. So there's a disembodied arm.
Yeah, no one saw the hand with
I mean,
blood?
I get that he's like changing positions and whatever, but it's like, come on, man, you're taking a lot of risks here.
Yeah. He also broke the cardinal rule of committing crimes, which is you don't commit more than one crime at a time. You're already outside of the school. You're already sneaking out. Don't do other, not illegal, but,
Nefarious deeds.
Right. Don't break more rules when you're already breaking a rule. Like, that's the cardinal rule of rule breaking. He breaks that, he gets caught. There you go.
This has been Jen's free tips on how to commit a crime. So, enjoy those. Yeah. Obviously, it doesn't end well. Before we get to the consequences of it, I just want to say, they stop at the post office real quick. Before they meet up with Malfoy.
Uh-huh.
And they're looking at the 300-plus owls that they have in this post office, which must be a sight.
Oh, yeah. That would be cool.
And they have little tiny owls that fit in your hand that are for local deliveries only.
They sound so adorable.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure they're insanely cute as they rotate their head around. But they also say, like, Ron wants to get an owl to go from the UK to Bill in Egypt. That poor owl! Can you imagine how long it takes an owl to fly from the UK to Egypt?
Yeah, that's gotta hurt.
My goodness. Dude, why are you putting an owl through that? It must take months, right?
It's gotta be a while.
Like,
You have to
that's
do
a
it. I mean-
long time.
Yeah.
I don't know what the average flight time of an owl is, but...
Well, now, in thinking about this, though, it can't be that long because they send an owl to... It's Charlie Weasley who's in Egypt, right?
No, Charlie would be in, like, Romania.
Oh, right, that's what I'm thinking.
Which is still a long way from the UK.
I'm thinking of when they sent it with Norbert and they got a response fairly quickly.
Correct. Still a long way away, you're correct. Yeah, that's still
Still
a good trick
Yeah,
for an owl.
that's fair.
It just caught me and I'm like, dude, those owls must have some type of magic put on them to be able to make that flight, but...
Zoom in owls.
Whew. Anyway, alright, so getting back to Harry and Malfoy. Obviously, Ron goes like, dude, he's gonna go straight to Snape, you gotta go.
Yeah.
So Harry sprints off, drops the cloak in a shadowy corner of the passageway, and...
I cringe every time I read that.
Yeah,
I know that it's a smart move, I suppose. In case he gets searched, he doesn't want to have it on him. But, like, that's your father's cloak, and it's an invaluable cloak, and you're just tossing it in the corner somewhere. It just makes me nervous.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. I'm always like, Long story short again, Snape ends up catching Harry, bringing him down to the office, and Harry is trying his best not to give any tells to Snape as Snape pesters him with questions, all of which valid and good questions that Harry struggles to answer without really giving himself away.
The one thing I like about how... So now we get to the eponymous Grudge, right?
Yes,
For the chapter.
yeah.
But one of the things that I really liked about the description of it was they mentioned that he felt like Snape's eyes were boring a hole into him.
Yes.
And he also mentions that with Dumbledore.
He's mentioned that a couple of times about Snape, too. Like,
Yeah.
Snape would look at him and he's just, like, looking through him almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a very intense
It's an intense
interrogation.
stare. Yes. After all of the... Harry keeps dodging facts and keeps skirting with vague details and what have you, and Snape's getting angry. So Snape starts taunting him about his father. Oh, your father was arrogant too. He had a couple of decent skills at Quidditch, and he thought he can rule the school with them, and blah, 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 blah. And he's just picking at him. Which Harry gets understandably upset at, because now I feel like you've gone from interrogation to now you're just being disrespectful towards family and
Right.
stuff like that. That's a different line of questioning at that point.
About dead family.
That too. So Harry ends up telling him to shut up, which Snape does not take very well.
No.
Try telling a teacher to shut up; it doesn't ever go well.
At least he didn't blow him up like he blew up Aunt Marge.
True. That would be a sight. Like just a giant Snape floating.
Just floating around the classroom.
So Harry ends up revealing that he knows a little bit of the history between James and Snape, in that James had saved his life at one point. Snape then rattles off the idea that, details might be too unpleasant for you, which is something that we can get back to in the spoiler section.
Yes.
But it was an interesting quote nonetheless.
Yes.
And Snape then informs Harry of the larger context of that situation. And it's like, yeah, James might have technically saved me, but there's a whole bunch of shady stuff going on that he was a part of that led to that situation even happening in the first place.
Yeah.
Which he didn't stop until the very last moment. Clearly, there's some unresolved issues with Snape and James, obviously.
Just a couple.
Yeah. We have talked about it in previous spoiler sections, so if you want to listen to those... Anna and I have talked about it. Julie and I have talked about it. We've talked about it at length. But it's interesting now that you have Harry and Snape kind of sitting there going back and forth with it.
Yeah.
Not really healthy for any of the above.
No, not at all. This is probably the least healthy interaction I've ever heard described between a student and a teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, Snape starts looking at what Harry actually had on him, and he finds the parchment, which is blank at this point in time. Snape tries every little trick, for lack of a better word, trick to get something out of the parchment.
Yep.
And eventually the Marauders map comes to life, and each one of the Marauders insults him in a different way.
So well done.
It's very well done. I could talk more about that in spoilers,
I also like the implication that the parchment is clearly aware of what's going on.
It does seem to have a sentient nature about it.
It does, because it makes reference to the fact that Snape is a professor, and it clearly seems to know Snape. Because
Yes.
it even says someone like you became a professor. So there's some implication that
We've
the
talked a little bit
parchment
about
knows.
how did Fred and George unlock this thing?
Right.
And
I often wonder
maybe
that
the map
kind of helps.
recognized them and was like, you might like us.
Right.
Like,
It seems
we're
fitting.
like-minded.
Right.
Here. Anyway, Snape gets upset at another insult that was thrown at him.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, so he throws powder into the fireplace and it's like, Lupin, I need you, or something like that. And then Lupin comes through the flu powder thing, pops into Snape's office, like, you called?
So nonchalant. I love how calm Lupin just always seems to be. Very calm, very collected, very just gonna dust some ash off my shoulder. What's up,
Just you wanted me? You called for me? What's up? What's up, dude? Lupin, Snape obviously says this is a dark magic thing, and Lupin looks at it and is like, childish maybe, not exactly dark.
Yep.
Probably just something that he bought at a joke shop. Lupin miraculously gets him out of Snape's office.
Yes. And Ron. Ron shows up.
Ron does show up,
kinda
verifies his story, and Lupin very quickly is like, see? Out. Get out.
Yep.
Get out now.
Very fast acting by Lupin.
Oh, it's very quick thinking by Lupin. But once they get back to about the Great Hall, well away from Snape's ears, Lupin really scolds Harry.
I love that.
In a very
deep,
emotional way.
Yep.
And I'm going to paraphrase it here, but it's essentially like, why are you sneaking out of the castle when you know there's a murderer after you? Mm-hmm. You're throwing away the sacrifices that your parents made to save you.
Yep.
You're hearing their sacrifices when a Dementor comes. How can you so flippantly throw this away?
Yeah.
And it's, again, you've had literally the last 2 chapters, you had Hagrid and you've had Lupin now talk to Harry and Ron and just be like, what are you doing?
Yep. I mean, Hermione has jumped in.
Yeah, and we've talked about that. It's like, it's the difference between a peer telling you something and someone that you respect that's above you. I
don't think Harry has a real clear-cut concept of parental figures or father figures, but he and Lupin have bonded in a very unique way
quick,
very
and
quick
deep.
and deep way. So when Lupin says this, and Lupin's also very calm about it. He's not angry and yelling like Snape. He's not, hysterical maybe like Hermione. Like there's no emotion to it.
Yeah.
Because it's just like this deep-seated disappointment, which is infinitely, like, disappointing someone that you respect and you want to make proud is infinitely more...
Sure. They say that about Dumbledore all the time.
Yeah. No, right. It's exactly the same thing.
And it's made worse by the fact that Harry knows Lupin knew his parents.
Yep.
And it's that much disappointment, like, you're throwing away the gift that they gave you.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
It's disrespectful to them. It's disrespectful to anyone who actually cares about you. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. It's not something that Harry can write off.
No.
He can write off if Snape is yelling at him because he knows Snape has it out for him. He can write off Hermione because he knows Hermione's a worrywart. He can't write off Lupin.
It would tick me off if I was Hermione, though. I'm like, I'm telling you this constantly, and it takes someone else to tell you this to have it really sink. I would be ticked.
Yeah. Oh, rightfully so.
Like, I've been telling you this all year.
Listen to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, some real reality checks from Hagrid and Lupin, two, parental figures in his life, and it's just like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Be better.
He does. He needs to wake up. He and Ron need to wake up.
I loved that interaction with Lupin. I've said this on so many podcasts now, but this Lupin, just the essence of Lupin is
great. Lupin is one of my favorites.
Anyway, speaking of Hermione, after Lupin scolds them, Ron and Harry, the first person they see is Hermione.
And again, Ron is just needlessly aggressive. Just out for blood against Hermione, immediately starts attacking her. She hasn't even said a word, and he's immediately trying to, like, cut her down.
It's incredibly unfair.
Yeah. 100%.
It's just incredibly unfair.
Yeah.
And she's teary-eyed.
Yeah.
So you're also just not recognizing the situation. The first thing you jump to is an attacking.
Harry assumes that she's upset because she's just heard about him and Ron getting into trouble.
Yes. Which is naive, but still better.
Right.
Still better.
Right. So.
Yeah, but after Ron attacks Hermione just says, "No, we just got news on Buckbeak.
Yeah.
He's been sentenced to death."
And that's why I'm also just... we can talk about Buckbeak in a second, but one of the reasons I'm also just sympathetic to Hermione is she gets this really devastating news that Buckbeak is going to be sentenced to death, or is sentenced to death, and she's fighting with Ron and Harry, but the first thing that she does is seek them out to try to tell them this, because she knows that they care about it.
Yes.
So it's like she's handling this fight, I think, in a
much more mature way.
Much more mature way than Ron is, where he's just being very aggressive.
Oh, 100%. Which also goes to the nature of, again, not making excuses for Ron, but generally women at that age tend to be a little bit more mature in a bunch of different ways. So it's just like, it tracks.
Yeah. Well,
realistically.
we see a lot of the emotional differences between boys and girls at that age in the next book, and that lines up with it pretty well. So this is just a little
precursor. It all
precursor.
tracks in like this is a very realistic snapshot of what this friendship might look like in reality.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Buckbeak. Poor Buckbeak.
Yeah. As much work as Hermione did, which we haven't even talked about that, like amongst all of the other work that she's had, which we've had detailed, she still found time to present an actual case for Hagrid.
Yeah.
Which is remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean, just the friendship and the care that she took to even put in that much effort is tremendous.
I think it's really sweet because we get to see that Hermione and Hagrid have a relationship that is outside of Harry, Yeah. In all the other books, we've seen them go, the three of them, to the hut. Hagrid and Harry have that bond where, Hagrid was the one to put him on River Drive and then also pick him up. And, so, like, they go a lot deeper.
Right.
Hermione and Ron, not so much. So it's kind of sweet to see that Hermione and Hagrid do have this friendship that doesn't involve Harry.
Yeah. No, I agree. On a positive note, we'll close it for the non-spoiler. And we'll go with a aggressive Hermione break noise. And we'll get back with spoilers. So thanks for listening, and stick with us for the spoilers.
You foul, loathsome, evil little cockroach!
All right, so we're back with the spoiler section for chapter 14, and I just kind of want to double back a little bit about that Snape-Harry interaction, and when Snape said, the details were too unpleasant for Harry's ears, which, that, I don't know if it's intended to be this way, but I feel like that's almost a shot at Dumbledore.
Really?
Passively, in
Why?
that obviously Snape knows a little bit more about Harry's situation than Harry does. And I would assume he then knows that Dumbledore has told him some stuff, has
Right.
not told him a whole lot of other stuff
Yeah.
that might be too unpleasant for Harry to hear. So he's like, yeah, oh, that's too unpleasant for you, huh? I guess he chose not to tell you that too. I see. Okay. And it's like just a little like passive needling that
Yeah.
Harry doesn't even know about.
So I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because I can definitely see why that would be Snape's taking a shot at Dumbledore. I thought he was kind of goading Harry a bit.
It's probably a little bit both.
Yeah. Like not, and I don't mean in a way of, kind of like knocking him down, but I think Snape knows to some degree that that's going to bother Harry, because Harry really wants to know what's going on. And that seems to be fairly consistent throughout the books, is no one really wants to tell Harry all of what's going
Right.
on, much to Harry's chagrin.
Like sheltered, put on like a shelf almost of like, no
Right.
one can harm this child.
Right. And it only gets worse as the books go on. But I feel like Snape is kind of doing that to like sort of torment Harry in that way too, where it's, you don't know what your parents were like. You don't know what happened. You don't know what James did.
And it's a lot of what we talked about earlier of just like a lot of one-sided views, a lot of
Yeah.
biased information that we're getting from certain people, and you and I look at the same situation, we could interpret it differently.
Yeah.
Shoot, that's what we're doing on this podcast. It's like all of the different guests that I've had have had different takes. Well, we've all read the same book.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Everybody has a different view of how a situation went.
This is actually one of the reasons why I like Lupin in this chapter a lot. Because I feel like Lupin is very cool-headed for most of it, and tries to be calm and collected. But I feel like Lupin is really the only marauder that tries to let go of the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's nothing but polite to Snape in all of these interactions. He's expressed remorse on occasion for not even the things that, like, he was never outrightly rude to
He was never
Snape.
the primary.
Right.
He was like
Right,
a
right,
tertiary.
But he's
Yeah.
even admitted that he feels bad that he didn't stop
Correct.
James and Sirius from
Which is a flaw. And
100%. But it's interesting that he's acknowledging that. He's trying to move past that. He's trying to be friendly to Snape. And Snape does kind of rebuff him. It feels like Snape really only is cordial to him on occasion because he's doing so because they're both professors at Hogwarts. But Snape can be pretty vindictive towards him, and he wasn't even the most egregious towards Snape.
Snape and Lupin's relationship is so interesting in this book because it's like there's all that history there.
Yeah.
And as professional and as mature as Lupin is handling it,
Yeah.
Snape is taking shots at him, obviously. He's
Yeah.
trying to undercut him and undermine him constantly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's also making the potion for him, which is a very difficult thing to do. Not many people would be able to do it. So, and Snape, for the most part, speaks to Lupin as a peer. I think he does see him as a peer, maybe more than if Sirius or James were in that position.
Right.
Because I think he respects that Lupin is smart. He knows that Lupin's smart.
Yeah.
It's not that. And he knows that he's a gifted wizard in that respect. But in every other respect, yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it is a very interesting dynamic because I feel like he really is the only one that tries to recognizes that he did poorly and tries to improve. And there's not a lot of recognition coming from Pettigrew, Sirius, or Snape.
Well, Pettigrew, it's all fear, because, I mean,
Right.
he's literally, like, running for his life for the most part of it.
Yeah. Pettigrew's redemption is so small. And
Yes.
it's not even a full redemption.
Not completely, no.
It's a moment of hesitation, really. And
And Voldy being very particular
Right.
in how he deals with hesitation.
Exactly.
Which
so there's no
goes back to
growth.
why he got Pettigrew in the first place.
Right.
It's a lot of fear and a lot of intimidation. But
Yeah,
and
Lupin.
then, yeah.
Lupin just seems like the only one who's
no,
actively
that's,
trying.
That's
to
a
be,
good take.
Yeah.
No, that's a pretty accurate take. No, I can get behind that.
Yeah.
Speaking of Lupin and the Marauders,
Yes.
there's something that he comments on about the map, saying, like, when he gets into his Harry, you're throwing away your parents' sacrifice speech, Lupin goes, these men would probably find it funny or entertaining, I think is the word he uses. They would probably find it entertaining that you were put in peril. Like, that you were put in a compromising situation. They'd probably find it entertaining. Spoiler alert, he's one of them.
Right.
And he knows the other three pretty well.
Yeah.
So, it gives a insight that to that map of and to them as people being like, we weren't saints. We had a little bit of a mischievous streak that could put others in danger.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't really think twice of it. We'd find it funny.
So I didn't read it as much of the emphasis on the like dangerous or perilous situations. I read it more like they would find it really funny that Harry was doing mischievous things that James had done.
I read it as, I mean, you literally just had a conversation of them putting Snape in a dangerous situation and getting out of it.
Right.
And Harry's using this to put himself on Front Street to potentially have a murderer, like, take care of him.
Right.
It's a very similar, like, you're putting yourself in a very dangerous position.
Yeah.
And the word that Lupin uses, entertaining, is just very, whoa, kind of comment to me.
It's very not consistent with the... It contrasts very nicely, but like the danger of the situation.
Yeah.
Like they do find it amusing, but these are also the people who befriended a werewolf and hung out with him once a
Right.
month. So like they didn't maybe think that much of dangerous situations.
Yes, because they were all talented individuals.
Right.
So they can get themselves out of trouble. They're all smart. They're all quick-witted.
Yeah.
I'm including Pettigrew in that. Not to the extent the other three are.
Right.
But I think people undercut Pettigrew's actual talent and ability more than they should.
He learned how to be an anim.
He did. Yeah. He learned that, and he actually did the spell that Sirius was accused for,
Right.
which is not a
Those
small
are
feat.
right.
Which we talked, Anna and I talked a little bit about that. It was like, people sleep on Pettigrew, which is the whole thing, and that's probably why Voldy was like, people sleep on you. I don't sleep on you. Come, whatever.
Yep.
But I just found it, well, even, like, I wonder when the insults come at Snape.
Yeah.
Is that, like, literally each individual one is like, let's throw an insult at them, and, like, their brain or their magic or literally their quill is the one, like, writing these insults? Or is it just, like, Lupin or Sirius or James with their quick wit just writing all of them? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it, like, a flavor of each one? Or is it, like, one just writing the blanket, like...
I always imagined it was a flavor of each one.
I hope that that's the case. I want that to be the case.
Yeah. I always, for some reason, assumed that they were each...
Because that would also give Pettigrew the same type of, like, sense of humor a little bit, and the
Yeah.
same kind of wit that matches the others a little bit.
Which also you kind of then understand why the four of them were friends.
Yes. Yeah. It flows better. I hope that that's the case.
Yeah. That's how I interpreted it. Was
That's
that
gonna
it
be-
was each their own.
We've decided that is our headcanon.
Yes.
Yeah, so there was a couple of interesting things from, the Snape interaction and the Lupin interaction, which, we talked forever about Lupin and Harry and
I
Snape.
do love Lupin.
I love Lupin so much. But did you have any other kind of thoughts on anything else?
So one thing I forgot to mention in the last chapter that we did together
okay.
that I did want to comment on because I want to throw my hat into the ring on this.
Oh, uh-oh.
I have opinions on Hermione and Trelawney and McGonagall.
Oh, boy. Okay, here we go.
All right, so I listened to you and Elizabeth break it down in chapter 6 and talking about, that was the tea leaves chapter?
My little, whatever it was, 5-minute rant on
Yes.
Trelawney. Yeah.
Yes. So, I, maybe not surprisingly to you, I side a little bit more Elizabeth.
What?
I know. No one could see
They're
that
great
coming.
friends, for those that aren't aware.
Yeah. Known her for just a bit. I agree that I think it's less about her ability and more about the fact that she's just kind of a drama queen.
Oh, she's... Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that she's a drama queen,
Right.
for sure, yeah.
And I think that that's what rubs people the wrong way. But the thing that I noticed, because, you know, you're talking about Hermione being maybe a bit closed-minded, and I want to address McGonagall in a second.
Separately?
Yeah. I want to just do Hermione right away. And you guys were talking about Hermione is not showing Trelawney any respect.
Sure.
And it's very out of line for Hermione. She's usually very respectful for teachers. 100%, if that were the case, she has to be taken to the side and told you can't do that. That's not, Trelawney is your elder. You should be more respectful.
I think that's what Trelawney should have done, too, is just take Hermione to the side and be like, hey, look.
Yeah.
I get that you don't like this subject.
Yeah.
Just drop it.
Yeah.
Like, let's move on.
Yeah.
I can't teach you. You can't learn from me. Let's separate here.
Yeah.
It'd be the responsible thing to do.
And I know you took exception with that because you felt like they were kind of attacking her, Trelawney, a bit.
The fandom as a whole, I think, doesn't really treat Trelawney
with much
as
respect.
positively as... I think it's a little undeserved.
Okay. So what I wanted to throw in here for this, with specific respect to Hermione, is that I thought it was interesting. We're coming off of Chamber of Secrets, where Lockhart, the total fraud, is teaching. And Hermione falls for it, hook, line, and sinker.
Oh, I love where you're going with this.
And then finds out at the end she was wrong. Now it's this new year at Hogwarts. It's a new subject, it's a new teacher, and the teacher is kind of questionable. She's missed a couple predictions, or made very broad predictions that people
vague predictions, yeah.
Right. I think part of what is driving Hermione in this is that she is very aware of her failure to pinpoint Lockhart,
Interesting.
and she is overdoing it with Trelawney.
Interesting. That's an interesting take. Okay. I was getting ready to ask you this question, and then you kind of beat me to it. So Trelawney, I will never say that she is a great professor. My whole thing is that she just doesn't get enough credit where credit's due. She always gets, taken down a lot.
Yeah.
Undeservedly. So, where would you put her on the roll call of teachers? I think we're in the spoiler section, so...
Yeah.
I think universally everybody has Umbridge dead last.
Oh, God.
For
I hope
obvious
so.
reasons.
I hope.
So, that one aside.
Yeah, right.
Now you brought up Lockhart.
Yep.
And Lockhart knew one spell really well. Other than that, didn't know his subject very well.
No.
Did not know how to teach it.
Yeah.
Are we putting Trelawney... Snape maliciously goes after some students.
Yeah, I have a hard time putting Trelawney... I think Trelawney's probably middle of my list.
Okay.
Lockhart, Umbridge, the Carrows, Bin...
well, yeah, okay.
Bin, Snape, Quirrell... I don't know where I'd put Quirrell.
Quirrell's hard because we don't
Quirrell's
really
hard 'cause
see him as a
he's-
teacher
yeah.
very often. Yeah.
Who else are we missing?
There's Crouch as Moody.
Oh God, yeah.
He taught them
he did
things.
Teach it. Well, that one's a little bit harder. But she's definitely above all of those, and then I'd have to think a lot harder where to put her.
I would probably... I'd agree with you. I'd go bottom of the middle tier.
Yeah.
Towards the bottom of that middle tier.
I would say that's fair.
But I don't think she at least knows her subject very, very well. She's an expert in her subject, which Lockhart can't say.
Yeah. This book I don't want to say, it definitely sets you up to think that she's terrible at it, but the more that you get on in the series, it makes it
more
accurate.
often than not, she's actually right about
Right.
things. Whether she recognizes that she's actually right,
Well, and
but that's the nature of the whole thing, which you can't blame her for.
to Elizabeth's point, she's better when she's not trying. I think that's
I'll give her that too.
I think that's also a little bit what is frustrating about the whole very dramatic thing, because I think that's a very alienating way to act all the time. And that's where she tends to make bad predictions. But she's hamming it up in her classroom and she tells Harry, you were born in the winter. And he's like, no, I was born in July. Like, she's kind of trying to be something that she's not when she's doing it. But when she's just kind of minding her own business, or when, getting whatever that was, not possessed, but like,
I agree. She's probably better when she's not trying. I feel like when she tries, she branches into other forms of, like, targeted guessing.
Yeah.
Which is a skill, not necessarily like a...
That's kind of what she does with Lavender's rabbit.
Lavender, Neville,
Yeah.
like other things like that. Those quick spot predictions or whatever you
Right.
want to call them are more like targeted guesses than whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
And Hermione's very smart. She picks up on that. She doesn't feel very comfortable with that style of guessing, but I think that she's very, instead of being willing to listen to her, I think she just...
Ferenz gets a better rap, but he teaches a different form of divination that's
Yeah.
mostly star related.
Right. They're
Which
not equivalent.
Is more quote unquote logic based, because you can see stars and you can see the move. You can see that Mars is red.
Yeah.
You can kind of see those things.
Yeah.
Whereas crystal ball reading is just, that's hard. You either can do that or you can't.
Yeah.
So.
So that was my take on Hermione. Was I thought maybe this is just like a...
That's a
bit
good
of
take.
bit of
I hadn't thought about
production.
that before. That's good.
And then my point that I wanted to make with McGonagall is probably less interesting than that. This book does not portray McGonagall very well.
It's probably the worst portrayal of her in the series. I can't...
Yeah.
I'm just reading it and I'm just like, wow, really, Minerva? Wow, okay.
Yeah, like she's a bit catty.
Oh my god, you went there. You
I went
really
there.
went there.
I went there.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
But it also, I was thinking back a little bit when I read it, when I was listening to this, and then I was thinking about high school, and I mean, I can remember some of my high school teachers sometimes saying things that they maybe shouldn't have said just because personalities might not have lined up
Sure.
100%. But the thing that sticks out to me in this, and why we say this for the spoiler section, she ends up standing up for Trelawney in a big way in book 5.
That she does.
So I don't think that she likes Trelawney. I don't like in a personality wise, but I don't think that she...
They have very conflicting styles.
Yes.
About how to go about teaching their classes.
Yes.
Yeah, in book 5, I mean, it's Umbridge. Umbridge just...
is the great uniter.
Yes. In a very roundabout, torturous kind of way.
Yeah. But I don't think McGonagall would have stuck her neck out for Trelawney if there wasn't some level of professional respect going on. I think maybe they just did not have personalities that meshed all together, and she said some things that maybe she shouldn't have, but also I've had teachers who've done that too, and I don't think it makes them bad teachers. I just think it's humanity.
I think McGonagall, she recognizes it in herself a couple of chapters ago when they're talking in the Three Broomsticks about Peter Pettigrew.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, I was very harsh with him. I regret that now.
Yeah.
She has those moments where she reflects on how she has been.
Yeah.
And is like, oh, that was probably not the best.
Yeah.
I think maybe in book 5, she looks at how Umbridge is treating people and goes, ooh, I've kind of said some similar things about her that's not necessarily accurate or fair.
Yeah.
And then she kind of steps in between them.
We do see a softer side to her to book 5.
Yes. McGonagall takes more of a motherly role because...
Yeah. The whole scene where Harry thinks that she's going to yell at him, but she offers him a biscuit. I mean, there's definitely there's more humanity that I think gets...
McGonagall's a great character. I love McGonagall for many, many different reasons. I've just kind of looked at some of the things she's said and she's done, and I'm just like, what are you doing? You're not a 13-year-old. You're not like Ron or Hermione that get excuses. You're a little older.
In McGonagall's defense, I do think some of the things that she's mentioned about Trelawney do have merit, right? Like when they come from their first divination class and they're all really depressed and she turns into a cat, no one's doing anything to really acknowledge
That's more
it.
of her being quote-unquote catty because she did something spectacular and no one's paying attention to me because you're worried about another class.
But on the flip side of it, if every year your class came in and they were all really depressed because they thought someone was going to die, that's got to be rough on your kids. Like, I would be upset if someone
Sure.
I'm not a teacher, but if I had a classroom and every year someone came in and they were upset because they thought that they were going to die, at some point I'd get frustrated too. Like, stop telling the kids that someone's going to die. That's not... We were just talking before we started recording this about how there's no therapy in wizardry.
You also made a mention, though, that Dumbledore seems to be a very hands-off headmaster.
Oh my god, he is. And
just letting his professors do whatever they want. Like, there's no oversight with Hagrid's hippogriff thing. There's no oversight with Trelawney telling kids they're going to die every, first lesson of their third year. There's no oversight with Snape being very malicious to Neville.
Snape needs
And
so much more supervision than what he is.
Seems to be a running trend, though. Like, you can point to a couple of different teachers and be like, what you're doing really, like, appropriate? Like, you could probably point out half the professors and be like, that's a little inappropriate. Or, like, what McGonagall says to Trelawney in public. Dumbledore's got to be like, hey, I get that you guys aren't on the same page here. You can't say that in front of students.
Right.
You just can't.
No, 100%. She's in the wrong there.
So there's, like... And again, you could probably point to half of the professors that he's had, and they have their own little issues.
Yeah. It's an interestingly run school, I will say. I feel like maybe... It's
a little Miss Frizzle vibe
from
Magic School Bus.
But, like, not always in a good way.
Yes. They're chaotic, but, when people almost do die at the school...
When Moody turns Malfoy into a ferret, it's McGonagall that yells at him. We don't even see Dumbledore's reaction to it.
No, Dumbledore is just having fun at his Christmas parties, putting the vulture hat on, being like, what's the problem, everybody? Let's party.
Yeah, maybe, if he were a bit more hands-on. But that is, to be fair to Dumbledore, well, not really fair to Dumbledore, but to his characterization, he is very hands-off. He doesn't tell Harry a lot of things that are going on.
Well, he's got other issues literally, they talk about him being called by the ministry every other day, and him having other issues in the world that he's got to address.
But occasionally you might want to make sure that your teachers aren't, like, abusing children.
I just get the vibe, though, that now, in the wizarding world, teachers seem to be a very respected, very highly regarded profession.
Yes.
And maybe part of it is, you have this job, you should do your job. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're the expert in your field.
Yeah.
Do with it what you will.
So you get to call the shots of how you do it.
Kinda, yeah. You know what I mean?
I'm all for that. I'm not a fan of, like, bureaucracy with things. But I feel like maybe there should be some sort of review process where, like, if you're berating children because their cauldron melted, that's, like, probably not good for anyone.
Yeah, can you imagine if the students, like, reviewed teachers? But then that gets messy with, like, house alignments, and people can get, like, then you'd have to cipher through what's legit and what's just the kids saying whatever they want to say.
Right.
There's a whole lot of that. And then the parents are probably like, yeah, we did it, so you can do it too. Like, we put up with all of that.
Right.
You're fine.
Don't worry about the fact that a quarter of us turned out to be blood purists. This is fine. So one other thing that I thought of, that I also want to touch on, because we mentioned it but we didn't really go into it, although we did exchange a look when we said it, was in this chapter, Snape is boring into Harry. Mm-hmm. Staring him down. And again, we've heard Harry describe Dumbledore like he's got very piercing eyes, he's looking at him very deeply, and then we've also heard him describe Snape like that. I don't necessarily think that Snape was reading his mind, but it definitely creates a lot of parallels, is maybe the wrong word. It alludes to it strongly, right? Like, he's said before he feels like Dumbledore is staring at him very deeply, and gets the impression that he's reading his mind. And then you have
Yeah.
little things where, because I thought it was interesting that she specifically mentioned that Snape was just staring very deeply at him. So part of me is thinking he probably wasn't necessarily reading his mind, but he was probably thinking about it.
Yeah, I think it's like, I think she writes it almost as like just waiting for a tell. Like you're looking for them to
Right.
blink, look to the side, some tell that they're not telling the truth.
Yeah.
That's how she writes it. But obviously later on we learn more in depth about legilimens and what is involved in that. That's an aggressive form. Like he's like attacking your mind
No,
almost.
right. And Harry would have noticed if that were the case,
Yeah.
because you do feel that to a degree. But I just thought it was interesting that the two people that she described as being very piercing with their stares are the two people that we find out
They're very good
do
at that
that
skill.
very well. Right.
They're very good at that skill, both of them.
Yeah. Because you
Um,
very rarely see her describe, like, McGonagall as... At least I can't recall a time up to this point.
It's a stern look. that
Right,
McGonagall
exactly.
is.
Stern is always how she describes McGonagall.
Yeah.
The deep staring, the unsettlingly deep staring.
No, it's a talent that they both share
Yes.
that isn't a super common talent. I mean, to be that good at it is really hard.
Yeah.
But no, they're quite special with it.
Yeah. they
But
are.
yeah, it is interesting how
Yeah. The word choice I thought was...
she drops those nuggets in
Yeah.
very smoothly.
Yeah.
And it's like a detail that's there and then just thrown. And then you like reread it on like your third or fourth reread and you're like,
Right.
oh, that's interesting.
She's very good at setting things up like that and making it feel inconsequential, and then you come back and you think of it something later that it references or alludes to or...
Yeah, and we had that discussion like, is it something that she knew
Right.
she was going to set up later, or is it something that she went back to and was like, yeah, I'm going to pull that?
Yeah.
Things like the put outer, I think she looked back on and pulled it.
Yeah.
This she might have been setting up.
Yeah. It seemed like she had an idea of where she was going with the Marauders in this as well. Like longer term. Because she does start to drop
Yeah.
information like
Wouldn't
that.
you love like a Marauders series or a prequel or something like that?
Oh, it would be so good.
It'd be fascinating. But I don't know that we're ever going to get that.
Well, yeah, not great news for the franchise with Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah, that did not do well.
No.
I don't think it even made $100 million domestically, which is not a good sign.
No.
Not a good sign. So,
And it's funny, too, because I haven't seen the last two, but I had read that one got better reviews than the second one.
yeah, my review of it was basically like every fault that I have with the third movie was because of what they did in the second movie. So I
okay.
can't really necessarily fault it on its own. It's
Okay.
more going back to what I didn't like about Crimes of Grindelwald.
As long as we all just continue to collectively pretend that Cursed Child didn't happen, I'm okay.
Did you actually read that? Did you?
I did. I heard it was really good as a play. I heard the people
It's
who
much
saw
different
it-
as a play than as the...
Did you see it as a play?
I have not. Anna did. Anna has seen it, and she's reported that back. Like, the book, not as great.
Yeah.
The
I've-
play was good.
I had heard that a lot when it came out.
I don't know what the demon train lady would
Trolley
come
lady?
out. Yeah, that was
That was interesting.
a revelation.
Yeah.
But I don't know how that translates on stage. But yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah.
I choose not to believe that in my headcanon.
Yeah, me neither.
As much as I loved the different Cedric Diggory iterations,
Yeah.
like Order of the Phoenix, Cedric Diggory, Death Eater, Cedric Diggory, and like the different like multiverse.
I thought the multiverse aspect of it was pretty cool.
it was interesting.
Yeah. Like, I thought those things were interesting, but I just didn't like the before and after, I guess. Because I didn't like the details that existed when they weren't time traveling. I don't even know if they technically did time traveling right. I didn't think that much about it, but...
I have to. I read it when it first came out, and I haven't read it since.
Death Eater Cedric Diggory was what I remember being the better part of it.
It's an interesting twist for
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
And I'm a big Cedric guy, so if you couldn't tell through the first couple of mentions of Cedric, but we'll get more of him in book 4. It's all good. But yeah, anything else?
No, I think that's all I got.
Cool. All right. Well,
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Finally. We
I
got you
know.
on here finally.
Yes.
But
Third time's the charm.
we'll get you on here again. It's all good. So, especially for it won't be a long. We're not going to have you on just for book 6. We'll have you on much earlier than book 6.
I hope so.
Yes, but we'll have you on a lot for book 6.
Awesome. That would be great.
Anyway, we'll wrap it up here. Thank you guys for listening. Let us know if you have any comments on all the things that Jen and I talked about today. Post it on Twitter, Instagram. You can leave us a voice message on Anchor, and we'll put it into the episode. That's something that we've discovered recently.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So if you leave us a voice message there, we'll kind of add it into the episode, and we can kind of talk about your comment or your thought. So if you have anything on, Lupin, Snape, Harry, it's all good. Let us know. And thanks for listening, guys. Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hogwarts a Pod.